Hilton brings you new ways to stay. With experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Welcome once again to the Dr. Sky Show, proudly heard on newvoices.com and the many radio affiliates around the country that the Dr. Sky Show is aired on. If you're a first-time listener to the Dr. Sky Show, our subject matter includes the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather, all visible on the internet at www.drsky.com. As Dr. Sky rolls the world through the internet and around the world and other media, we're proud to have today as a very special guest on our program.
An icon of radio and television broadcasting for well over half a century and the longtime anchor and managing editor of the CBS Evening News. It is a high honor and privilege to welcome Mr. Walter Cronkite to a discussion with Dr. Sky. Welcome, Mr. Cronkite.
Good to talk to you in one of my favorite corners of the world.
Well, thank you very much for being interested in the subject matter today, which of course goes everywhere from astronomy, space, aviation, and of course, broadcast journalism. But first, if I may, I'd like to let you enlighten all the listeners about how did you first become interested in the space program from a journalistic perspective?
Well, I tell you, I'm old enough to go back a long way into the world of aviation. I had my first airplane ride in a Waco open cockpit airplane with a Curtiss OX-5 engine on it. My father took me for a ride with a barnstormer in Kansas City, Missouri, where we lived then. He had done some flying in World War I, and this, by the time I was 6 years old, was just a couple of years, 3 years after we signed an armistice. So it was fairly early on in the days of aviation, and as a matter of fact, we had a little unexpected landing on that flight. So my interest and excitement in aviation was came very early in my childhood. I followed it then all through my young years, reading about it, hitching rides whenever I could, and that naturally led into an interest as we began to develop rocketry and a new form of propulsion that gave us the promise of getting out into space with human beings. My next personal experience was with it in World War II in London when we were being assaulted by Hitler's flying bombs, as they were called,
yes,
and the deeper V2s that came in with true rocketry. So I saw that firsthand. I saw a launch from 150 miles away after we landed with the airborne. That is, the correspondent landed with the airborne in the Netherlands, and the Germans were launching their V2s from Wassenaar in the Netherlands, the far west side of the Netherlands. We were on the east side, 150 miles or so away, and I could see the contrails going up as they launched their rockets on London.
It must have been
so my curiosity was immediately aroused, particularly when they bombed me out of my apartment.
Oh, geez.
In London. But as the space program began here, naturally I wanted to follow it as a story, and as the managing editor of the CBS Evening News, I assigned myself to it. And that made it easy for me to cover it.
Mr. Cronkite, moving on to the days of the Apollo program, this is fascinating. Was President Kennedy really the driving force behind us going to the moon? And did he ever share some of his passion about this with you directly?
President Kennedy, well, it was mentioned once or twice in conversations, and there was no question that he was very serious about it and had I don't know whether I would call it a passion. That would seem to include a kind of a inner excitement about it that I didn't really see from Kennedy, but that does not mean he didn't have it. It could just simply mean that I didn't have the kind of time to develop that sort of a discussion with him.
What were some of your thoughts and feelings as you reported in that very historic day?
I'm sorry, I just really understanding that.
I'm sorry.
What would you say?
I was asking you, what thoughts and feelings did you have as you reported that man had finally landed on the moon after Neil Armstrong made that historic first effort?
Well, I've said before that I had just as much time to prepare for a man's landing on the moon as NASA did. I covered the development of NASA even before it was NASA, when it was all part of the Air Force program and rocketry. And so I had all that time to prepare for it. Wally Schirra, the astronaut from the original Mercury program, who was my technical assistant in the mysteries of space flight at the anchor desk, he kept asking me all night as we were waiting for the landing up there. He said, "What are you going to say? What are you going to say?" And I said, "Well, Wally, I never planned anything like this in advance of what I'm going to say. I know the facts that I want to include, but as to how I phrase them exactly, I don't know what I'm going to say. But don't worry about it. I'll be saying something." Well, when they announced that man was on the moon, all I could say was, "Wow, golly, gee."
There you go.
Immortal words.
That's very, very interesting. I've also had the privilege and honor of interviewing Captain Schirra, and I would agree he's a wonderful person, and we share some thoughts on some of the same concepts about going to space, as I'm sure he's helped you over the course of time. But of all the astronauts that you've interviewed in that area, who, in your mind, stands out as probably some of the more interesting or intriguing individuals?
Well, Wally himself was one of the most interesting, simply because Wally has a great sense of humor, and we weren't getting a lot of that out of the space program, not on the air or in interview situations where the astronauts were all trying to be as serious as they possibly could about this very great load that they were carrying of successfully getting us out to the moon and back safely in that decade. And the space flight was a heroic effort on their part. They had every right to play it the way they wanted to play it. But Wally would get on the air and not quite play it as seriously as some of the others, which made him a lot of fun to be around. Right,
more down to earth.
Yes. Well, yes. If you want to make that pun, I'll let you do it.
Sure.
Yeah, but all of them were interesting. I think it would be hard to pick one above the other. They each had their own personality. They each had their own interest in particular aspects of space flight. And to the same question, you could get several answers about motivation and how they felt about the flight itself. There was a wonderful story that Wally Schirra told me, as a matter of fact, or that is the answer he gave me when I said, "Come on, Wally, when we hear about your original flights in this Mercury," and he was the third man to fly, I think, as I remember.
Yes.
I said, "Come on, Wally, you know, all you guys are so serious, and when we ask you about what you're really thinking of as you lay there on that couch with your face to the sky and that little tiny capsule, what were you really thinking of? You keep telling us how brave you all were, and you had all this redundancy built in, and there wasn't any concern about it." And he said, "Well, I can tell you what I thought." He said, "Waiting on that little Redstone rocket there, to go up." He said, "When the Redstone, anyway, flying there in the capsule, Mercury capsule."
Yes.
He said, "I looked at all those instruments, I looked at all those buttons, I looked at all those toggle switches that I had to hit at certain times, and I had all that plumbing that I could see for the important fuels that were being used." And he said, "I looked at all of that lying on my back waiting for that rocket to go up, and I said to myself, good gosh, just think, this whole thing was built by the lowest bidder."
Yes, and that's absolutely correct. And amazingly, it worked. That's what we look at in the history of the space program.
That's your money saying it's time for a McDonald's run. Because with new McValue at McDonald's, you get more than you expect. Like buy a 6-piece McNuggets and add a McChicken for just $1. Your money says let's go. Get more than you expect with new McValue. Prices and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Just a few more questions that I think our audience would certainly love to have your opinion and perspective on. But with the recent mission of Dennis Tito, the first official, quote, tourist in space, what is your feeling about private citizens going to the space? And would you yourself, if I'm correct, you yourself were slated to go up as a future tourist, or sometime in history? I think I've heard that you were looking to do that.
Oh yes, the government was going to send a journalist as the first civilian in space after the two members of space committees from Capitol Hill. They were going to play their politics first. Right. Then the journalist was going, and they were in the process of eliminating those who they didn't think were qualified, getting down to a few. I think they were down to about 10 or 12 while I was still in the running, and we were anticipating one of us being selected and one selected as a backup and taking all the training and going. Unfortunately for the teacher, maybe fortunately for us, but unfortunately perhaps for history,
right.
The teacher, of course, was lost on the shuttle.
Yes, very
because,
sad.
President Reagan was trying to build votes with the teachers union, and ad-libbed in a speech in Chicago at their convention, and I'm going to see that a teacher is the first who goes into space. So poor Krista McAuliffe was the one selected for the Challenger flight, which was the flight that the journalist would have been on. But despite that, I think most journalists would go in a minute to space. It's a great story, and I would go today if they'd only let me.
Oh, that would be wonderful. As you know, Arizona State University's School of Journalism and Telecommunications is named in your honor. Can you give some advice for students listening here that would like to pursue a major and a career in broadcasting? To hear it from yourself, I think, would be most impacting.
Well, my advice to them would be to learn the arts of journalism long before they tackle the practicalities of broadcast. I think if they learn to write and to report and to understand the principles and ethics of good journalism, they can write for a newspaper or magazine or the internet or broadcast. The techniques of broadcasting, while there are, particularly in television, some fundamental cosmetic situations that have to be faced, unfortunately, the person who has the capability of following these journalistic principles is the one who is going to succeed.
Wonderful advice. And just one last closing question or two, if possible. What are some of your latest projects that people, whether it be on the internet, radio, and or television, can stay in touch with some of the activities that you're now involved in?
Well, I do a lot of speaking, public speaking, and some magazine writing, and I write forwards to friends' books. I may be the foremost forward writer in the United States today. That's a joke, of course. I didn't hear you laughing, so I had to be careful.
No. I'm just patiently listening. But I do understand.
Well, I'm kept very busy, and of course I still have contacts. I still play the reporter role, whether I'm actually on the air or not. I pick up the phone and call sources in government, private business when a story interests me, and probe it a little bit, make some capital out of it with my talks around.
It's very fascinating. Just want to thank you, Mr. Cronkite, for taking the time to join me, Dr. Sky, here on our program today, and I'm sure our audience is most thrilled with hearing directly from you, as we have some of the historic portions of the space program. And I myself remember at age 45 today, back in 1969, on that very historic date, when you told all the world about our first human being, Neil Armstrong, setting foot on the moon. I remember, like many of us, watching in a small black and white television. And even to this day, I find it incredible that we really did go there. But it really is a high honor and privilege, and I want to thank you for coming on. What Dr. Sky is doing is...
Pass my best wishes to all my friends out there at ASU and the journalism school there. Oh. It's a great program they've got, and I'm very happy to say that it's winning a lot of plaudits around the journalism world. You know that as a former professor in the business yourself.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Cronkite, it's a high honor, and I do hope we can speak again. and your words are most exciting to the listeners out there and most motivating. Thank you, sir, and Godspeed to you, and look forward to speaking to you soon, and a rapid recovery to you, please.
You bet.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
As Dr. Sky always encourages you, please always remember to keep your eyes to the skies.